Hello all, I am Azime Pekşen Yakar and I will be talking about Chaucer's subversive use of food in his Fabliaux in the Canterbury Tales. Food plays a very prominent role in Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which is a 14th century collection of stories narrated by pilgrims during their journey to Canterbury Cathedral. First of all, we understand that food is very important in the Canterbury Tales because the prize for the storytelling contest, which Harry Bailey, the innkeeper of the tavern, starts, is a free meal at the tavern on their return. Throughout the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer also uses food to reveal his characters' personality and values by showing their eating habits or describing them with metaphors of food. As Elizabeth Beeble states, food consumption plays a role in medieval society that extends far beyond the concept of sustenance and survival. Likewise, Sarah Gordon also believes eating and drinking represent more than just basic mundane elements of survival. Therefore, all food representations, choices, forms of consumptions in medieval literature play a significant part in understanding and analyzing their associations with religion, class conflicts and hierarchies, and gender relations. In this course, I will focus on Geoffrey Chaucer's functional use of food in his Fabliaux, namely the Miller's Tale, the Reeve's Tale, and the Merchant's Tale, and the Canterbury Tales. First, I will talk very briefly about the basic definitions of Fabliaux, its development as a literary genre, frequently used plot structure, and motifs in Fabliaux corpus, and Chaucer's contribution to it. Then I will have a look at Chaucer's use of food as sexual metaphors in the carnal universe of the Fabliaux. Fabliaux emerged as a French genre in the 12th century. There are approximately 160 old French fabliaux which survived in 43 manuscripts with different versions. This estimated number of extant fabliaux shows the popularity of the genre during the Middle Ages. Their exact date and author cannot be specified. However, the earliest author is known as Jean Bodel. Although the fabliaux arrived in England no later than the 13th century, only a few English fabliaux survived. There was no trace of fabliaux in Old English literature, but Middle English literature produced a few of them. These are Damsred, the Pennyworth of Wit, and the Fox and the Wolf. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales includes 6 fabliaux: the Miller's Tale, the Reeve's Tale, the Merchant's Tale, the Shipman's Tale, the Summoner's Tale, and the Friar's Tale. Fundamentally, Chaucer's contribution to the genre is his insertion of realistic portraits of his characters. The addition of an introduction to the tales is a significant contribution. However, the most striking difference from his precedents and contribution to the genre is the omission of his obvious pornographic characteristics of the French tradition. Chaucer omits the notorious descriptions of the body parts and profligate situation, which cover an important part in the French corpus. In Chaucer's version, Fabliaux, defined as a short, humorous, and bawdy tale, usually follows a plot, which involves an adulterous young wife who cheats on her gullible and old husband. The action in the Fabliaux thus revolves around the love triangle in which the young wife pursues her sexual adventures and betrays her husband with a young and virile man. It further develops on the wife's struggle to hide her sexual exploits until she achieves to manipulate the situation to her own advantage. The adultery the Fabliaux includes causes Fabliaux to be labeled as an anti-feminist genre, and in the Fabliaux, women are pictured as deceivers, naggers, liars, and temptresses. Evidently, the Fabliaux as a genre, with its pejorative and stereotypical descriptions of women, corroborates the claims of anti-feminism. However, when we have a look at the relationships in the Fabliaux, we see that women are actually victimized and occupy secondary roles. Women in Fabliaux do not yield to subjection, which the dominant medieval discourse of gender demands. Instead, they create their own meanings and get pleasure in their marginal space. Adultery and trickery the Fabliaux include encourage the audience or the reader not to denounce the immoral nature of women, but to laugh together. Extramarital sexual affairs in his Fabliaux do not necessarily condemn them as betraying adulterous young wives, but in a way, provide them with a temporary empowerment. He uses food as sexual metaphors, both to display the marital power dynamics in which the wife's victimization is implicated, and accordingly, their aversion of this victimization is achieved and they attain partial liberation through their sexual activities. Marriage of an old man and a young woman implicates wife's inferior position to her husband in the marriage. As Miller the Pilgrim tells, youth and old are often in debate. Fabliaux's old men often want to satisfy their lust with their young wives. So, while they are describing the Fabliaux women, they use specific food symbols denoting women's young age and virility. For example, in The Miller's Tale, John's wife Alison is depicted as sweeter by far to look upon than is a pear tree in its early bloom. Alison's youth is emphasized through a new pear tree. Similarly, in The Merchant's Tale, January tells his friends what kind of a woman he wants. As you see, January's debasing description of a possible young wife for him includes many food references, such as pear, fish, meat, and beef, and all of these foods must be fresh to be eaten and consumed by him. If they're not fresh enough, they are nothing but straw, which is for animals' nutrition, and importantly, it stresses that it does not provide any sexual pleasure and satisfaction to him. Moreover, these lines aptly clarify the gendered notion of food. That is, men are associated with animals. They are hunters, they are known for their physical strength. So, the high protein content of the meat has contributed to the traditional view that meat is the appropriate food source for men. As Elizabeth Beeble further explains, I'm quoting, women have been aligned both with vegetation and with butchered animals. While the nurturing, gentle, and other so-called feminine qualities are seen as being reflected in plant life, women's physical attractiveness to heterosexual men is at times described in meat-like terms. Woman does not benefit from her association with dead animals as man does from his link with the living ones. For women, the analogy can be both debasing and victimizing. Thus, in the sexual politics of meat, Carol Adams's idea of association of animals with men and aggressiveness, and conversely that of vegetables with women and passivity, is once more reinforced. However, Fabliaux women subvert their passivity and victimization through their active sexual life. The idea of this resistance is underlined with food representations associated with women's sexual power and with men's lack of virility. For example, in The Miller's Tale, Alison betrays her husband John with their lodger Nicholas, who creates a vicious plan parodying the biblical flood. Nicholas persuades John that there will be a great flood and he should buy a tub and fill it with food to survive the deluge. John easily believes it and fills the tub with ale, bread, and cheese, and hangs the tub in the rafters. Originally, ale, bread, and cheese are associated with biblical stories, yet the Miller's Tale employs them to accentuate the power of parody and as humor, and as well as to mock John, because while he falls asleep in the tub waiting for the flood, Nicholas and Alison are making love in John's marital bed. The description of the moment of revel and melody foregrounds Alison's sexual power, virility, and the pleasure she takes from her sexual escapade. The adulterous affair between Nicholas and Alison is treated as a business of mirth, and sexual pleasure undoubtedly offers satisfaction for both Alison and Nicholas. The erotic climax is thus subversive as it allows Alison to win out among all the males in the denouement of the Fabliaux, since the sexual pleasure of the wife is attained at the cost of the husband's humiliation. Moreover, Alison escapes punishment while the male characters are punished somehow. The jealous and old husband, John, falls from the tub when he hears the cries of Nicholas, water, water, and suffers the derision. Nicholas's bottom is badly burnt, and Absalom is insulted. The ending of the Miller's Tale then can be interpreted as a kind of poetic justice and Alison's victory. Alison knows the rules of the game and behaves as she's supposed to. Glenn Wright also suggests that, quoting, the Fabliaux world is thoroughly physical one, with physical pleasure as its central value. Then Alison pursues her sexual desires though forbidden, which is symbolized with her body description as a new pear tree in the very beginning of the tale. So, the Miller's Tale, which presents illicit sexual urges in terms of youth, natural imagery, and melody, hilarity, and ingenuity, ends with a happy ending for Alison, who is able to come out on top. Yet it is absolutely a bad ending for John, who is humiliated, labeled mad when his neighbors see him with a broken arm in the tub with ale, bread, and cheese. Merchant's Tale also includes the marriage of incompatible ages, January and May. Their wedding feast is filled with merriment and joy, with music and delicious eatables. Wine and delicious eatables are familiar representations of food and drink in wedding banquets. But before consummation of their marriage, January is described while drinking some aphrodisiacs. January drinks spiced wine and eats specific foods which are consumed as aphrodisiacs, whose recipes can be found in Constantinus Africanus's On Copulation, which is a work on sexual intercourse as its title suggests. January has the wedding night just as he dreams, and he thinks his performance will be harsh due to all these aphrodisiacs. However, May's idea of the same night is not explicitly mentioned, yet only implied with this line: "The bride was brought to bed, still as a stone." Similarly to Alison, despite her husband's obsessive watch and oppression, May subverts her submission through establishing an alliance with Damien, who is the young squire of January. May's resistance is positioned in the very place which subordinates her. As a married woman, she is under the guardianship of her husband. Although she is aware of her subordination, she has to comply with the dominance who or which disempowers her. Strictly kept by her legal owner, May at first yields to January and the medieval discourse of patriarchy to be a part of the power. However, later, she also partially resists this system. Therefore, she makes use of the resources of the dominant to fulfill her own needs and desires. One of these resources is absolutely January's garden. She turns the garden, which was built by January for his own sexual pursuits, into a garden where she enjoys sex with her lover Damien. This garden is resembled to the Garden of Eden, where January talks about Adam and Eve. Such biblical allusions to the Garden of Eden, however, do not suggest that Fabliaux represents January's fall from virtue to sin. Indeed, January's reasons for building a garden are all related to conjugal debt. It is clear that his demand of marital debt accords with marriage rules. However, marriage for January is only a tool that allows him to continue his late lecherous life in a moral way. Thus, the garden he built is an agent through which he can achieve his sexual ends and exercise his power on May's body. He thus wants to visit the garden, particularly in spring. In the garden, May deceitfully vows her love is true and tells January that she wants to taste the green pears. Yet January cannot help her because he is blind. Told to climb up the tree in advance, Damien waits for May until she climbs on January's back and then up the tree. Then the central scene of the Fabliaux takes place. Pear Tree becomes the space where May acts out her desire rather than her husband's. She does it through stepping on January's back. More importantly, it is not only a tree, but a pear tree, which symbolizes May's sexual appetite for Damien. Yet the pear as a symbol is rather complex. It both symbolizes May's sexual escapade with Damien and also provides her this adventure since she tells her husband that she wants to taste these pears, implying she is pregnant. In the end, her desires win against her husband's and she is not punished because she is able to manipulate what January sees. May vindicates herself, stating that she has been told his sight will be restored if she struggles with a man in a tree. Although what January sees is more than struggling, he ends up believing his wife. Nothing is mentioned about Damien or May's further feelings. Although May's unfaithfulness is revealed, she avoids punishment and her marriage survives the betrayal. May's resistance provides her pleasure, though it is temporary. Similarly, in the Reeve's Tale, women are involved in acts of subversion through sexual pleasure, which are symbolized via food descriptions and analogy. The daughter Malin and the wife are subjugated by Simkin in the Reeve's tale, and they resist his oppressive treatment through their sexual affairs with the clerks Elaine and John. The power struggle in the Reeve's tale is more multifaceted than the other tales because there are conflicts between Simkin and the clerks, as well as between Simkin and his daughter Malin and his wife. In this struggle for power, Simkin is the ultimate authority who subjugates women and clerks. Simkin has a notorious reputation for stealing the grain which is to be milled. Elaine and John go to the mill and promise that they will not be tricked. Yet Simkin tricks them instead. What is more, they yield to pay money for a place to stay to Simkin. In that night, the miller sends his daughter to the town for bread and ale and roasts them a goose. They drink strong ale until they go to bed in the same room. After all these foods and drinks, they sleep, except John and Elaine, who hear farce of Simkin and his wife. Thinking that they will be mocked at Oxford if they return there without any compensation, Elaine gets the chance to make love with Simkin's daughter while they're sleeping in the very same room because of Simkin's drinking so much. This sexual intercourse is absolutely a rebellion to and liberation from Simkin's oppressive guardianship because he wants her body to help him in his plans of social climbing through marrying off Malin to a rich man of a higher status than herself. Thus, Simkin's reaction to Malin's sexual affair with the clerk is an expectable one. He is furious at Malin's loss of virginity. However, his response is not because of his love of the daughter, but of his future plans. Malin succeeds in attaining the authority over her desires and subverts the oppression of the father through her sexuality and due to Simkin's heavy drinking and eating. Although the sentence, quoting, "It had been too late for to cry," unquote, creates disputes on Malin's sexual intercourse if it were a rape or not. The denouement of the Fabliaux proves otherwise. Malin, described as a strong girl, has the strength to stop Elaine, who is a poor clerk and is unlikely to be strong. The only thing she needs to seize the so-called rape is to scream, because they all sleep in the same room. Yet, Malin, remaining silent, makes use of a rare opportunity and enjoys the night. Moreover, Malin sees of Elaine and calls him "dear lemon." And also she tells him the place of the cake made from the flour Simkin had stolen from the clerks. Hence, Malin takes revenge from her father not only with her loss of virginity but also with the reward she gives the clerks. Clearly, the cake is a gift and perhaps, quote, "a payment for services," unquote. Again, calling the clerk good lemon, Malin begins to weep. Moreover, this farewell of Malin to Elaine is given in direct speech, which is quite significant because, quote, "women in medieval texts are frequently allowed no voice. Often their feelings and opinions are not even reported," unquote. So, Malin's farewell, which includes the information of the place of the cake she made from the flour that Simkin has stolen from the clerks, clarifies that the night spent with Elaine is the erotic rebellion of Malin. Clerks' vengeance also works because they both take the flour and the cake made from the flour stolen by Simkin. Thus, this time, the miller, the duper, is duped, beaten, and humiliated. In Chaucer's Fabliaux, food is associated with women's sexual escapades in a positive way, denoting women's sexual power, while the other representations of food reveal man's unsuccessful effort to satisfy his young wife sexually. So, the descriptions of food implicitly reflect man's impotency because of old age. Chaucer employs representations of food as a powerful agent to lay bare the power struggle between wife and husband with regard to their sexual activities. Thank you for listening and see you on Friday.